How do you think Russia's likely to respond to these latest remarks by Rex Tillerson?
Well, if we take the last ones first, with Tillerson there saying that it's very important that countries get together and organise to fight against the Islamic State, to fight against that the terrorist group, there's absolutely no doubt that Moscow is on board. That is, if you like, the low-hanging fruit in terms of the relationship between Russia and the US. But if we look at what else the US Secretary of State has said, for example, that it's willing to support and defend civilians, defenseless civilians, anywhere in the world. And to Moscow, that really is absolute anathema for people in Moscow, for the foreign minister, for the president. That reminds them, and they remind us of that consistently, of the US invasion of Iraq, going into Libya alongside NATO, toppling regimes. This is the kind of thing that Moscow really comes out hard against, and these are the kind of comments that it certainly wouldn't have been hoping for as the Secretary of State heads to Moscow tomorrow.
Now, he's going to be meeting Sergei Lavrov tomorrow. What does Russia hope to get out of this visit?
Well, the very first thing that Moscow wants is a much clearer idea of what President Donald Trump stands for. And the US is going to be putting its point very forcefully that it wants Moscow to drop its defense of Bashar al-Assad, to drop its support for the Syrian president. And that's partly, at least, because Moscow has put huge amounts of time, huge amounts of money, and has lost dozens of Russian soldiers in its fight protecting the Syrian regime. But it should be noted here that for Moscow, Bashar al-Assad isn't the only person that could fulfill what it's trying to achieve in Syria. He's certainly the most important person at this point. But if somebody else could step into his shoes and push Russia's political goals and support those goals, it could be that Moscow would be willing to support him, to support somebody else. But at this point, it looks very unlikely that when Rex Tillerson meets with certainly the foreign minister, and perhaps we're hearing with the president, Vladimir Putin, though that's yet to be confirmed, that the US could be coming up against a bit of a brick wall when it calls for Russia to make its position on Assad more flexible, more supple.